Hey all, it's Scott here. It's Monday and we're taking a look at U3, the final enemy. This is going to be part one of this adventure because it's larger than the other two in the U series. So let's take a look at it. This is the module here. It's significantly thicker, but we're going to take a look at the first 12, 13 pages of it because therein lies all the setup for this adventure before you get into the, the basics of, the dungeon crawl and the grind. So let me grab my notes and I'm going to take you through my thoughts on this adventure and what it means to the U series. The adventure, again, is done by Turnbull. It's for levels 3 to 5. And hopefully by this point you've been able to get those levels, through the other two adventures, especially if you've added in other things. The basis of this adventure is going to be assaulting a Sahagin fortress. Or I say assaulting because legitimately that's what you're doing. They call it a scouting mission. But nothing really lends itself to that, and that's my problem with this particular adventure. There are 4 things that are requested by the town of Saltmarsh that the party who's going to be put into this scouting mission is supposed to do before the alliance that should have formed in U2 between the mermen and maybe the aquatic elves, the lizard men, the humans, the Lokatha, all come in and destroy this fortress, but they need to know the specifics of what's going on in the fortress beforehand. So the 4 things that they're asking about here: determine the strength of the Sahagin. Okay, got it. Locate important areas within the fort. This would be where the officers are, any important locations and stuff like that. That's more difficult because that means not only are you within it and looking for the strength, you have to look for specific areas that would cause problems for the assaulting force, the army that would come in, the alliance. Discover the defensive works and also the traps. Well, if you're doing that, you're really, again, going very, very deep into this fortress. And if you're defeating those things or discovering those things in these chambers, you're going to have to fight them. So that being said, again, it's forcing you as a party to go in and really clear this place, in my opinion. And then the 4th one is: how advanced are their preparations for an attack? That's more ambiguous. But Don, when he starts to talk about this, because he goes into a lot of exposition in the beginning of it, he talks about how dangerous this is. And how dangerous this module is. And he's absolutely right. It's exceptionally dangerous, especially considering how many Sahagin are here. If you get in a Sahagin room and there's combat, you have the ability, the DM has the ability to bring in a lot of other Sahagin. One of the things that he talks about, because 3 or 2/4 of this adventure are actually done below the surface, and because of that, you have the ability for sound to move very quickly through the water and at distance. And anything in the water that's used to it, lizardmen or Sahagin, are very adept at hearing those things. So although there's a lot going on in the fortress that you could say, well, if there's construction or something like that, they don't know that it's a battle. That's one aspect that you could bring in, and really the characters could get wiped very easily. Another one is that the fortress, because the Sahagin hate light, is completely dark. So one of the things you could say, I'll throw a continual light out there, and we're going to go through blind these guys and tear some stuff up. However, if everything is completely dark, any shred of light is going to raise an alarm. So therefore, you have to temper how much light you can have. So it makes for a very, very difficult adventure. On top of that, 2/4 of it are below the surface. He talks about the cold of the water. If you're not prepared for it, I don't know exactly how you get prepared for the cold of the water. Water breathing isn't going to get you prepared for it, nor are there wetsuits or anything else that these guys are going to have. So in that standpoint, he talks about having negatives to your attack rolls, negative to your armor class because of cold, and I've dealt with this in the folio. It's not a very nice thing to do to the players, especially at 3rd to 5th level. So and then on top of those things, you're talking about every single person that's in the water that doesn't have either a ring of free action or maybe the helm of underwater action that you could have found in U2 in the marshlands if you did that side adventure, is going to be under the effects of a slow spell compared to everything else around you, because you just can't move in the water. So in those standpoints, it makes it incredibly difficult for players to go through this when they're trying to sneak or they're trying to find these things out. I think this is a horrible end, in my opinion, to this adventure series. I just don't know how much fun it's going to be for the players. They're going to feel like once they get into it, that they've been thrown into something that they're not overtly prepared for, that they're not going to have a lot of fun with, and that is pulling them in two different directions. One is to scout, and one is to kill. And while you're scouting, you're kind of doing both. So I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of what is going on in this adventure. I think it's got a lot of treasure. I think there's a lot of stuff in it that's great, but in that standpoint, I think the setup lacks, and you might find yourself at kind of a bleh end, or even a TPK for everything that you put in up to this point, which is going to be a lot of hours of gaming if you're going through the U series, which of course Don wants you to have gone through before these, because he really wants you to have set up the Lizardmen Alliance, which kind of takes you to this place. Even the maps that the Lizardmen give you are wrong, because the Sahagin have done such extensive reworks of the interior of the fortress. So that makes it difficult. The recon party is substantial. They give you 6 Marines from Saltmarsh that'll go with you, but they're probably not going to have the ability to go into the underwater parts, so you have to hold them off like a Conan crew, where they've got some warriors with them and hold this line. They'll probably all die by the time you come back, but nevertheless, they're there. And 12 Lizardmen. This is problematic. If you've got a party of 6 or 7 characters, you've got 12 NPCs that you're supposed to be running, along with Oceanus, the aquatic elf. If you're still running him as a NPC character, plus a pseudo dragon that was found in YouTube, that's a lot of stuff to put on the plate of the DM, who's also dealing with a massive amount of Sahagin. And one of the things that they do in here as well, they put all the Sahagin statistics in the back in an appendix, so they don't take up pages inside the module. So when you're looking at a block during the course of the adventure, you've got to keep referring back to statistics that might be somewhere else. They're not just going to be right there in front of you. So that's another hard thing for the DM. So if you're doing all this running and all this legwork, you don't want to be dealing with 14 NPCs at the bare minimum, or even higher in the first level if you've got the Marines. Blah, that's a lot to deal with as a DM. One of the things that I know when dealing with something like Savage Worlds that I play is that it's for the lazy DM. I like to be a lazy DM if I can. It's a lot to already do, so why are you putting all this on you? Not to mention dealing with how many Sahagin you're going to be bringing into particular rooms or stuff like that. So again, that's very, very difficult. The first part of this adventure is going to take place with getting there. You can either go through the marshlands again, which they warn against, because it takes you 6 days of humping through marshes that have things like black dragons and stuff like that in them. So that's difficult. So you're going to probably take the sea route, which is taking a ship very similar to the Sea Ghost, with crew down to this area where the Sahagin fortress is. And then once you get off the ship and go into the Sahagin fortress, there's a chance that the ship, 100% chance if it stays during the night, can get attacked by Sahagin and probably be taken out in the course of the adventure. That's something else that the DM would have to run off screen to even know if the crew is even there, or the ship has been taken by the Sahagin by the time that the people get out, the party gets out of the scouting mission. Again, very, very difficult. A lot of prep work, a lot of side time. I'm not thrilled with it, just to be quite honest with you. And I'm not going in to try to, rework the wheel on this one or something. It's just, I don't know if the end game is going to be worth it on this particular piece, especially for the setup that we're talking about. Let's see. Have I missed anything here? Oh, the ship has a really cool picture of the crew. Check this out. This crew was done by a very, very, very early piece by Keith Parkinson, who passed away in 2006. This was one of his first works at TSR, for TSR. I absolutely loved Keith's work, and it's great to see that this is kind of where his genesis started with the company. And there are a couple great pieces of his in here that I'll probably show later, but that's one of my favorites. It's in black and white and in color, which I've showed you the color version of. Anyway, that is the basic setup. You can get 10,000 gold pieces from Saltmarsh for doing this adventure. And again, I don't know that it's worth it. I think the most impressive thing that you could do with this adventure is, after it's all said and done, do the assault. with all the other stuff. Maybe throw in battle system or something like that, or what your favorite combat system, and just watch the alliance of 4 or 5 races take on the Sahagin, and that would be cool to me. That's probably the funnest end game I've got with this whole thing. And again, that's not necessarily in the module, but it's something that you could look at doing. But that's more prep work on your part. Anyway, I think that covers everything about the setup for this. Obviously, you're going to have different mechanics for water when you're talking about 5th edition. You'd be getting into advantage, disadvantage, and stuff like that. But nevertheless, that is the setup for this adventure. Again, not super thrilled about how this series winds up. But I will take you through the dungeon levels and exactly what you're going to face in the next part 2 of this one, and then we'll be done with the EU series. So thanks again for taking your time to check out what we've got here at Art of the Genre. And I hope you'll subscribe and hit notifications and put any comments below. I'd love to hear them. If you've run this, if you found difficulty, or if you had anybody just flat out quit and not want to continue the adventure. Whatever the case, hope to see you soon, and great gaming.